our way to him as a private citizen. And I do want to thank Mike. Mike taught me more about governmental accounting and financing than any class, any master's class I took in college. He showed me what it takes to understand a municipal budget, and I'll always be appreciative of Mike. And our city is a stronger city because Mike Wright served. I want to begin this presentation by thanking first our accounting and finance team, certainly Carly Standridge, Savannah Hornsby, where's London Jenkins? London did all this work for months, and
I think he came to pass out the budget books, and I think that he's taken a little bit of a break.
you know, sometimes I want to take a break from me too. I get it, I understand. So I don't blame London for disappearing. They have done a really good job, not just a good job, a great job in preparing this budget for you. You have in front of you 238 pages, well over 1,000 line items, tens of thousands of data points that are in front of you with this budget, but at the end of the day, it's prepared by well-qualified and amazing public servants who, they don't do this because it's a job, they do it because they love our city. And I'm proud to work with Carly, you, and your team every single day. I also want to thank our comms team, Sarah Gilmore, and her team for putting this together, Huey and Shelby and everyone who was involved, trying to put this together in a way that's stylistic, that is understandable, because when you have this much information, trying to make it consumable for the council and frankly for the public is an art, and I think they've mastered it, and I really want to thank them for their job. It's a lot better than the PowerPoint, Mike, that I did 20 years ago, what they have prepared for us today. So let me jump right in, because this is, and let me warn you, a long presentation, but I want to begin. We don't have food. Well, we actually have Babe's Donuts left over from the morning staff meeting. But I do want to kick off with a video that celebrates what our team has done for the past year. So that just gives you a small sense of what our people have been doing all year. And this city is complex, and it's much more complex than it was 20 years ago when I began my service. And this budget does its best to reflect those things. So if we can put back the presentation. So it begins for us internally with the standard of excellence. This is our standard we try to achieve every single day, to be the most accountable, innovative, and effectively managed city in the United States. It certainly doesn't mean we reach that in every single thing that we do, but that needs to be our absolute goal and accept nothing less. And we as a team over the last 2 months have recommitted to this ideal. And where we fall short, we're going to work to meet that standard of excellence. And our budget helps us do that. And certainly while we're achieving our standard of excellence, we have 4 core beliefs that I know you know well that are important, and everything we do must be tied back to those core beliefs. So let me first start by just congratulating this city council and our team for the financial strength that they've created. And this has been a legacy with this council since 1985. This city has always been financially strong. We have $1.5 billion worth of assets. Right now, we have $623 million of ongoing capital budgets. We are AAA by Fitch, which is the highest of the high, and a AA1 by Moody's, which is elite. Your city is well managed financially and is strong and built to take on the challenges of the future. It really begins with our core belief number 2, and that is planning for our future. Several years ago, we realized there were things on the horizon we need to be ready for. First was making certain that we were going to meet the demands of a complex water and sewer department, and we passed a 10-year plan, which we will talk about in a little bit. There were also 2 other issues we realized we had to take on in fiscal 22, and that was a new public safety plan and a conversion to RSA. We began planning for all of that in fiscal 22, and in this fiscal 27 budget, you really see it coming together. Again, I cannot thank our team for what they did. Carly and all of our team members who led this from an accounting and finance, they made our ability to do this, even in a challenging environment, possible. And everything that we pledged and began in fiscal 22 are on track and on time today. So how are we able to do that? Well, we've done that through the planning process, which has allowed us to have a very strong unassigned fund balance, $85 million of unassigned fund balance between our general fund and water and sewer. And as I was talking with our team members today, I will always remember April 27, 2011. And one of the things I will remember the most is we had to cash flow tens of millions of dollars in the weeks after. There were points where we were having to spend $100,000 a day just on public safety costs, with the hopes that one day we might get paid back. And I can remember the work of Mike Wright and his team. There was a copier in that corner right there, and every time I came into this room, there was Mike Wright and his team working on the financial side of it. Keeping those strong unassigned fund balances are paramount, because we never know when we might face that next emergency. The second thing that creates financial strength for us is the reserve amounts we have in several key funds, such as Public Safety Fund, Elevate, General Fund, and River District Fund. I say all that is to highlight our strength, which gives us a flexibility in case we need it, but not to say to the City Council we should go out and spend it. For example, the reserve fund within the Public Safety Fund. Those are the dollars that are going to be needed to help us with the cost of transitioning from the Police and Fire Pension Fund to RSA. The funds in Elevate are going to help us continue to use Elevate as a fund to support public safety and do Elevate projects throughout our city. So those funds are there. They're in reserve, but they're certainly going to be allocated at some point based off the planning that we've put into place and working directly with our city council. Why are those reserves important? Because we face budget challenges, and we face those budget challenges beginning this year. First, the Alabama legislature last year enacted 2 acts that will cut $1.87 million out of our budget. So 1, we have to deal with that legislative impact. 2, we anticipate that SSUT will reduce our sales taxes, or reduce the sales tax we would have collected by $11.2 million. 3, our health insurance costs are $1.397 million higher than prior year. 4 is the closing of B.F. Goodrich. The total revenue that B.F. Goodrich generates for the city, and just direct revenue, I'm not talking about sales taxes that their 1,200 employees produce. Just the revenues we receive is around $800,000. And then last is the conversion to RSA. For us to move from the retirement, from the police and fire pension fund to RSA, is 12.7. So when you add all of that together, and it's $28 million worth of budget challenges that we will face in some form in fiscal 27, and some of these will continue on into fiscals 28, 29, and 30. Having those strong reserves are paramount for us to deal with these challenges now and into the future. So to deal with those challenges, one of the things we're having to do is make that commitment, and for us, it's that recommitment that I talked about to our standard of excellence, and then really focus on accountability within that standard of excellence. Not only for city departments, but also for the agencies that we fund. So for city departments, there's a 5% cut across all city departments. That will generate $1.6 million. This is non-salary line items. A 5% cut across all city departments. For agencies, we are holding that budget line item even. So why are we doing that? If you look at agencies, if you said they are a department of the city of Tuscaloosa, they would be our fourth largest department. So public safety, if you lump police and fire together, that's naturally our first. CFG is second, agencies are third. Agencies, in my opinion, have never gotten the review and attention. We will review thousands upon thousands of data points with our departments, and we should. But agencies, again, if they were a city department, would be our third to fourth largest, however you wanted to categorize it. We believe at the city that we need to take a stronger role. That is why a few weeks ago, and I think I know Mr. Busby and Mr. Henry were there, we informed the agencies that we're going to be increasing our accountability standards. Lily McIntyre, who works within accounting and finance, will be leading that effort for the city of Tuscaloosa. It's very important. Those are taxpayer dollars. And just like police need to spend their taxpayer dollars wisely, every agency that we fund needs to fund taxpayer dollars wisely. The other thing we're going to be looking for is partnerships. It's well known that the city of Tuscaloosa takes on the lion's share of funding agencies within Tuscaloosa County. And we fund at a higher percentage rate than the population that we represent. We have informed agencies that beginning in fiscal 28, we want to, especially for the agencies that have a countywide or a regional-wide mission, we want to see higher partnerships in those agencies. The city of Tuscaloosa cannot continue to take on countywide responsibilities because that comes at the detriment of the taxpayers that we represent and work for every single day. So with agencies, there are a couple that do have some changes. I'm only recommending one agency that we add to the agency funding list, and that is the Community Soup Bowl. This is to assist them not only with feeding, but also security and things of that nature. I also believe we need to be a better partner with them as we look at the issues of mental health and look at strategically what can we do in the future to help support their efforts and how they can help support ours in dealing with many of our populations who are in distress. The other major agency funding recommendation that you will see in my budget is that I'm recommending that the city council take over the maintenance of Cardinal Park, McKinney Park, Monash Park, Harmon Park, Rosedale Park, and ultimately Freeman Park. This is an image from McKinney Park in West Tuscaloosa. There's no way this meets any standard of excellence. Of course, this is a para-maintained park. The city owns the property, para-maintains it. I think the time has come for the city to take over the maintenance of these parks. The other issue that we also think is important is that sometimes when we have trouble, in many cases they happen in these parks. And so having a connection with TPD and public safety we think is also important. We have seen great results with Springbrook Park, Burrell Odom Park, Carlton Park, where the city has taken over the maintenance of those parks, not only in terms of quality, but also in terms of public safety. Para notified us that their maintenance cost of those parks is around $32,240 annually. We're reducing their appropriation by that amount, and those dollars will go into CFG. But let me be clear, the city's maintenance cost of these parks will be higher in 27, most likely in 27, but certainly 28, 29, and 30, because we're able to implement a higher standard. So let me jump into the overall operating budget overview. The general fund budget, the Elevate Tuscaloosa fund budget, and the water and sewer fund budget, collectively operating budgets are $356.7 million. You as a city council have a large responsibility, a large fiduciary responsibility. And we take as a team very seriously this recommendation to you. The general fund is $234.5 million, Elevate a little over $31 million, water and sewer a little bit over $91 million. Before I jump into the general fund itself and begin breaking down each of those three, I do want to give you some budget highlights. First, public safety commitment in this budget is $105.3 million. So you clearly see that the number one priority of the city of Tuscaloosa is keeping our neighborhoods and businesses safe. Embedded in that $105 million is $12.7 million for the cost of conversion from the police and fire pension fund into the retirement systems of Alabama. Our operating budgets contain a $121.7 million for our infrastructure-related department, water and sewer, CFG, ESD. So again, it points out what our primary responsibilities are at the city. We're investing $6.1 million into public education here in our community with this recommendation to the city council.
Wait,
And
6.1?
16.1 million. A little over 4 million in vehicles and equipment. I do, before I jump into the general fund, want to highlight a couple of public safety investments that we're excited about to the city council that I know you'll have an opportunity to dig deeper in the weeks ahead. First is the expansion of our behavioral intervention unit. Lieutenant Parker is here today, and you all know the amazing work that he has been able to accomplish. Mental health, as I mentioned recently at the State of the Community, public safety is our number one responsibility, and mental health is our greatest challenge within that. So to help us continue to meet that challenge, I'm recommending an additional investment of $581,000. It's not only just for the personnel, it is for the software, furniture, everything related to adding these personnel. We're recommending 3 TPD social workers, 1 dedicated cyber intelligence analyst, the continuation of because we did this for 1 year, or we did it for the remainder part of fiscal 26, continuing the funding of an additional social worker from Indian Rivers. If we make this commitment, DCH has committed to assign a social worker to our team. So we would get that added benefit. So that's not part of the $581,000. That is DCH saying, we want to add value to your team. I never, it's 20 years ago, I never thought that we would have social workers at the city of Tuscaloosa. We have come to see the value in recent years of what this does. In addition to this, under municipal court, my budget does include an additional social worker as well within municipal court. So our goal is to keep mental health clients, those who have serious mental health illness, out of our jails, out of the legal system, and into a framework where they can get health and services. I know that Lieutenant Parker will be is more than excited to be able to come talk to you about that when y'all go through this in your public safety budget review. The next investment that we wanted to highlight today was a little over $1 million for life packs for fire and rescue. We're recommending 17 life packs with an initial cost of $157,000. It's a 7-year lease for these. These tools are invaluable to our fire and rescue teams that respond. Chief Delk will be able to provide you a detailed overview of what this means for our personnel. But basically, for laymen, this is equipment that can be provided to a citizen who is in distress that gives our EMTs the information they need to do what is necessary to ensure that they're able to get you transported safely to ER. Again, I'm not going to try to describe what he can describe for you, but I certainly think as a citizen, I know that if TFR was responding to me, I would want that life pack equipment so that our firefighters and EMTs can provide the treatment necessary on spot and immediately as I'm being transported to the hospital. So let me jump in now to general fund. First highlight is that my budget includes a $371 per year subsidy for every residential garbage, recycling, and trash account. This has been a long-standing practice of the city to subsidize this service. That is even with a recommended $2 a month increase for the cost of ESD. So we're recommending a $2 increase, but even with that, we're still saving residents $371 per month. How is that being funded? 194 of that comes from the general fund, 177 comes from the Elevate fund. And those, I know Ms. Howard remembers when we passed Elevate, part of the Elevate budget was a $5 million annual subsidy that was meant to reduce the cost of the monthly environmental services bill. So you see that reflected there. I think it's also important as you look at our general fund budget to judge us against our peers. As I was telling senior leadership this morning, if I were the mayor of Mobile, it'd be like cheating. Their city sales tax rate is 5%. Huntsville 4.5%, Dothan 4%, Decatur 4%. Some of these cities have occupational taxes. We do a really good job with the resources we have here at the city of Tuscaloosa. And I don't believe this council, nor does our team, get the credit for how they manage these resources, especially when you look at our peers. So in terms of looking internally at the general fund budget, what does it mean for our team members who are the difference makers here at the city? I'm recommending a overall 2.2% COLA for all employees. That 2.2% is based off the CPI, so that is a standard we have used for decades. I'm also recommending that for the public safety plan, 1 step, which is 2.5%, and for non-public safety, 2 steps, which is their steps are 1.5% per step, so it'd be a total of 3%. So the full, in other words, this would be a full implementation of our pay plan. So one of the big, certainly the biggest endeavor or the biggest initiative we have in this budget is the RSA conversion, which will impact our firefighters and police officers. That is a $12.7 million lift. That number is derived by taking what the cost of us for all of our employees moving into RSA, less out what we project we will pay out in fiscal 26, which arrives us at the $12.7 million. It is the single largest investment in the city's history, and it ain't even close. So it is truly a commitment to our public safety sector and the men and women who protect us every single day. I know Ms. Standridge has spent time with you on the RSA plan. This is a snapshot that you will be going over in detail. This is the public safety fund and how it's being utilized to be able to lessen the impact of that $12.7 million transition into RSA. We created this back in fiscal 22, and it has worked as we had planned it to do. And without those decisions we made in August 21, which was when we were working on the fiscal 22 budget, we wouldn't be able to continue to do the things that we have done. And again, it just shows the great vision and execution of the city council. So in terms of the public safety employee raises, it's an overall 4.7%. This assumes that every employee can move the steps. We do have some employees who may not have step movement because they've reached the end of their pay grade. This chart here gives you an idea of what the last 10 years have looked like within the public safety realm. Now, this is where it gets a little bit, not necessarily, well, maybe confusing for us, but very promising for our firefighters and police officers. So in addition to this 4.7%, with the transition to RSA, it'll also mean additional earnings for our police officers and firefighters. Let me walk you through an example. So in the first column that you see, that would be a police officer or firefighter coming in at step one, pay grade 1, step 1. And so their pay would be $58,951. So now we're moving to RSA. And so let's say we hired someone from Hoover that was in RSA, but they were tier 1 before they created the second tier sometime 10 or 11 years ago. Same salary. And then the last column on the right is if you hired a new police officer. We'll keep using police officer, and they're tier 2. So tier 1, going back to the first column, the retirement withholdings for an employee that was under police and fire pension fund would be $7,663. If they're tier 1, which they will become effective October 1, those retirement holdings are only $3,537. If they're tier 2, those retirement withholdings are only $5,010. So at the end of the day, when you get to what does that mean over a 1-year period? Well, first, per paycheck, that means for a tier 1, $158.72. And by the way, that's for the lowest paid person, either firefighter or police officer. So it gives you a sense, this is the minimum, this is the floor. For that tier 1 employee over the course of a year, that would be $4,126 extra. For a tier 2 employee, it'd be $2,652 extra. So the point I'm trying to make here is not only is our public safety sector getting a 4.7% pay increase, there's also an additional pay bump that will differ among the employees. The several hundred employees that are in fire and police will also get a significant pay increase. So you're looking probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 9-10%, depending upon where they are, if they're tier 1 or tier 2. Does that make sense? So it is a really good budget for our firefighters and police officers. For our non-public safety employees, we're recommending an overall 5.2% increase. Again, that is from the 2.2% COLA along with 2 step movements within the pay plan. You see again a 10-year snapshot of what that looks like. One of the challenges I highlighted earlier in this presentation was health insurance cost. You see that we project a 9.1% increase in health insurance cost. So we're recommending an overall 10% increase overall in health insurance for our employees, of which 70% will be borne by the city, 30% borne by the employees. Before I go into detail on this, over the next, we do have one proposal for you to consider, another option for us to look at that can potentially help employees. And Ms. Herbert will be we'll be sharing that with you in the budget hearing process. But I have charged Ms. Herbert with us looking at what else is out there. You can tell by this graph our health insurance costs are climbing. And we don't have time today, but she can share with you many different data points that we've been looking at to see what we can do to contain these costs. Many of these factors are just really outside of our control. But the things we can control, we want to identify and strategically attack. And Ms. Herbert's going to be leading that effort for us. But in this year's budget, what does that mean to our employees? So we have 4 different plans with an option 1 and an option 2. Option 2 is a higher deductible, but especially our younger and sometimes more healthy employees choose that option. So it gives you a sense of the different plans that are out there. So the cost will range from $7.06 of an increase per paycheck, and this is over 24 paychecks. We have 26 paycheck periods at the city during the course of the year. 24 of them, health insurance is deducted out of that. The cost will range from $7.06 all the way up to $30.11, depending upon where you fall in that plan. So one of the things we wanted to look at is what would this mean for our lowest paid employees at the city of Tuscaloosa. So we took pay grade 5, which is generally our crew workers, step 1. The annual salary is $39,584. We assume that the council passes the recommendation of the COLA in 2 steps. Their adjusted salary becomes $41,678. We less out the cost of health insurance, and that's at the highest cost of health insurance, the $30.11. The net increase of salary for that employee would be $1,371, which would be an overall net salary increase of 3.5%. The reason why we share that with you, and understandably so, sometimes employees will hear, well, my pay increase is 5.2%, but insurance went up 10%, and therefore I lost money. Well, the math doesn't necessarily work that way. So we wanted to show you what we believe what we know would be the impact to pay grade 5, step 1. So let me switch and move on to the makeup of the general fund budget overall. 42% of the proposed general fund budget is sales and use taxes. 12% is business licenses. And so the reason why I highlight those 2 first, 54% of our general fund budget is directly tied to gross sales within our economy. So when we talk about SSUT, removing those gross sales from our economy, it impacts more than half of our general fund budget, which impacts a large amount of the revenues needed to execute the services of the city. Property tax makes up 12%, and lodging tax makes up 5%. So that gives you a sense of where the revenues come in from that make up our overall budget. You can see the other sources of income there, from the water and sewer transfer, commercial and rental taxes, environmental services fee, and the rebate from Elevate, that $5 million that I talked about earlier. Now this is, if you're on the city council, this is your slide right here. And I was talking to our team members about this earlier. I'm trying to find the right word, a large part of the budget, none of us really have a lot of control over. But this is the part you have maximum discretion. And so this is where you have full decision-making authority of how these dollars are spent. So this year, we anticipate you will have 7.9 million new discretionary dollars. But before y'all go huddle with Mr. Busby back there and divide that $7.9 million up, just remember the challenges of the additional health insurance costs, the new vehicle cost, the conversion into RSA, the programs, the new behavioral intervention team. The 4 things I just listed out are greater than that 7.9 million. So to do much of what we talked about in the general fund, we've actually had to reduce, which is why you saw that 5% cut across departments earlier. So give you a sense of, the budget. It's more complicated than what people understand. And that 7.9 million for what we do at the city is not a large amount of revenue growth, as you will see in a second. In fact, about 20%, 25% comes from our SSUT allocation, which, as we know, falls well short of what we've actually earned in our community. So let's go through some of those revenue sources. First, let me talk about why those revenue sources we believe we need to be watching. First, if you look at this chart, you begin to see the October-May 2025 sales tax collections, and then the next column you see the sales tax collections for the same months this fiscal year. So department big box stores, they're our largest producer of sales taxes. They are down 10% for the first 8 months of this fiscal year versus last fiscal year. So our largest producing sector is down 10%. Building materials are down 5%. Pharmacies and personal care down 3%. Furniture down 15%. Jewelry, gifts, and novelties down 3%. As Ms. Sanders pointed out to me during the course of the budget the last few months, they're down despite inflation being up. So normally inflation increases the cost of a good, that increases the percentage of sales tax you receive. You usually get a bump, especially in the first few months. Now we have to begin doing the analysis of how much of this is because people are purchasing, 17% of people's purchases are online versus in going to a brick and mortar. How much of this is an economic effect? That is why you will see in the revenue numbers we are projecting, we are being very cautious in how we're approaching fiscal 27 from the general fund side and recommending revenue projections for you. These numbers are not positive. We're not economic analysts, so we can't delve in deeper to know how much is SSUT, how much is the economy. We certainly have a good idea it's probably a combination of both, but that is the trend line as of today. That trend line may not improve. When you lose a plant of 1,200 people, earlier I talked about the $800,000 in revenue that is going to be potentially lost. You're losing 1,200 employees who have somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 million worth of spending power in your community that will begin to get phased out in fiscal 27 and likely disappear by fiscal 28. So that was another factor we had to put into our calculus as we recommended this budget to you. So let's go through the numbers. First, city sales tax. If you look at the trend line beginning in fiscal 24, you see that our sales tax growth we're projecting over the next 4 years will be at around, if the council adopts the 2027 recommendation, our sales tax growth will be an anemic 1.29%. For a growing city, that is astonishing. As much as this city grows, as much as inflation has taken hold during those years, it certainly points to the fact that SSUT continues to rob our capacity. County sales tax, the average, if the council adopts the 2027 recommendation, the average sales tax growth for that period will be 1.2%. Business licenses fares a little bit better, as when you throw in 24, if you just took 25, 26, and 27, not as much, but if you keep 24, as we have with the others, that's a 2.87% growth. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the slowdown in the gross sale areas are happening. I don't believe we're the only city in Alabama that is seeing that. Property tax has been a very, very positive growth revenue line item for us. The average growth has been 6.67%. So we are seeing positive growth. But the downside of that, as I mentioned at the State of the Community, property tax only makes up 12% of our overall budget portfolio. So yes, it's growing, but it's not as large, and it cannot provide for the larger ticket items like RSA conversion in your overall budget. And then lodging tax, and with lodging tax, we are seeing positive growth. The overall growth rate is 3.26%. I'm going to go ahead and answer a question you may have in your mind, or you may be asking in the future. Why are we projecting 27 to be a little bit lower than 26 if we have seen a 3% growth rate? We exited out the Morgan Wallen concert. That was a bonus in our budget year. There have been no announcements of any large events. And so we felt like, to be conservative, let's exit that out. This also includes your short-term rentals. So this is lodging tax and short-term rentals. When you look at, in the general fund side, how are we spending by department? 42% of the general fund budget goes to public safety. So 42 cents out of every dollar that we spend is invested into our police department and our fire department, and they will tell you, why isn't it 50%? So, but I think we're showing our citizens that public safety certainly is job one for us, and we're making that commitment. You do get from this pie chart a sense of what our other departments represent. CFG 7%, Public Works, ESD at 5%, IT at 4%. Going back to agencies, they are 7% of our budget. In terms of categories of where are we spending, 64% of our overall budget is salaries and benefits. So as I mentioned to our employees when I'm speaking to them, the city believes in you, and just don't take my word for it. Take our budget. 64% of every dollar that we spend at the city of Tuscaloosa is invested back on the general fund side into our employees. The other categories are then small by nature, whether it's debt service, agency funding, and the other line items that you see listed there. As I was telling our team, I like to mark, each of our budgets and see how do we compare to the past. Fiscal 2007 was my first budget to the city council. In 2007, 60% of that budget was salary and benefits. We did not have Elevate in 2007. We did not have arts and entertainment. We did not have 311. We were nowhere near the city then that we are today. But even today, 64% of our budget is salary and benefits, and that includes RSA conversion, which is another $12.7 million that's been put into that calculus. So I'm very, very proud of that consistency. When we look at debt service, my first budget to the city council in 2007, 4% was for debt service. This budget is 7%. But we didn't have Tickerick in 2007, that first budget. Tickerick funded McWright's Ferry Road and also funded MLK phases 1, 2, and 3. Those debt service costs were actually being reimbursed by them. So if you take that out of the calculus, our debt service load is identical to where we were in my first budget back in 2007. Let me switch to Elevate Tuscaloosa, because when we passed this in 2019, we promised results across our community, and I believe that we have delivered. The next few slides are just a snapshot of all of the infrastructure projects that we have completed through Elevate Tuscaloosa. And I think all of us can take great pride in what our team has been able to accomplish. I accused Jeff Powell earlier of trying to suck down all the Elevate money, but then he reminded me that Audrey Buck has the Savings Center. So we certainly have a lot of competition. But each one of these projects,
I had to use that picture,
each one of these, we put that in there for a purpose. You were looking pretty cool that day, man. I wanted to put you in there. But each one of these projects has been a fulfillment of why we passed Elevate Tuscaloosa. And we're certainly excited what the Savings Center is going to mean, not only in terms of education, but economic development for our communities. It's also important to note that Elevate Tuscaloosa, 20% of it's dedicated to public safety. And without Elevate Tuscaloosa, I don't believe the conversion to RSA would have ever been possible. 20% of every dollar that we spend with Elevate Tuscaloosa is geared towards our firefighters and police officers. So let me go through the highlights of what you see in our Elevate budget. First, we have pre-K. We have near universal pre-K in Tuscaloosa, one of the few communities that have that. And as we continue to see test scores rise in the Tuscaloosa City Schools, I'm a firm believer that getting our academically at-risk students at 4 years old instead of 5 years old is making a difference. We know through the data from the Tuscaloosa City Schools that every at-risk, that 85% of the at-risk children that go into our pre-K program, by the end of first grade, they're reading on grade level. So if we're able to reach that child that early, we can change a trajectory. And for our families, it saves them $5,811 annually. So those dollars can be hopefully put back into our local economy. Summer learning has been another popular program that the city schools has implemented that Elevate helps to fund. 22% of the total pre-K 7th through 7th grade students attended summer learning. I hear nothing but positive feedback. I know Eli in the past has taken part of the summer learning programs. The Tuscaloosa City Schools is to be commended with what they've been able to accomplish with that. Dual enrollment has quickly become one of our most popular aspects of Elevate. Over 13,000 credit hours earned to date. We provide 12 free hours for every high school student. But I couldn't be more proud of our partners. The University of Alabama adds on top of that 9 additional courses at no cost, which is another 12 hours. So basically a free year of college. Shelton State, and Mr. Eatman, I know you're proud of this, they match our 12 hours. Again, another year of college. So if you're in the Tuscaloosa City Schools, there is no reason why you should not have 1 year of college paid for with our partnership between Elevate, University of Alabama, or Shelton State. It is a game changer, and I was talking to our team members this morning. I ran into a teacher at Northridge who's new in their career, but they actually use dual enrollment. So it made me very proud to see the difference that we're making. So we have 2 new initiatives we're recommending. I'm not going to go in much detail because Dr. Derry and his team will do a much better job of pitching this to the City Council. But one thing you're going to see in a later slide is partnerships have been paramount to Elevate Tuscaloosa. This is one of those partnerships. We're recommending that the City of Tuscaloosa join with the Tuscaloosa City Schools and the Houston Foundation in investing $148,000 to help attract and retain nationally board certified teachers. MBCT certification is the highest certification that a teacher can have. It is, and this is probably a poor comparison, but I'm in municipal government, so it's about the best I can do. Like for an engineer having a PE or an accountant having a CPA. This is the highest level of certification. And what we know by the data is students taught by an MBCT teacher, their students achieve higher outcomes. And we also know that teachers within the Tuscaloosa City Schools who are MBCT certified stay within the system because of the incentives that they provide. And we want to continue those incentives. We want to strengthen those incentives. And to have a partner like the Houston Foundation who is willing to put in $300,000 annually to this, to have the private sector, the city, and the city schools, I think we can continue to raise the quality of teacher. I will tell, I spent 9 years in public education. It's like public safety. I'm going to give another bad analogy. The safety on our streets ultimately comes down to that patrol officer. I ultimately believe that, Mr. Bell. We can have all the technology in the world, but that patrol officer on that beat is going to be the biggest factor in keeping our community safe. Well, in education, the number one factor in getting our children ready to meet the challenges of a technology-driven future is that classroom teacher. And if we can invest into a program that keeps the best teachers in our school system with our children, I think it will be an investment that will pay dividends. Certainly, we will require the city schools to provide data to ensure that this program is working. Another program or another opportunity we would like to recommend to the City Council to invest in is the expansion of the Sister Cities program for study abroad, travel abroad programs. It's probably one of the more popular programs that the city schools has, and it's a partnership with Narashina, Shorndorp, and Sunyani Tekman in Ghana. We believe that the expansion of this program does a couple of things. One, the opportunity that it provides more young people from Central, Bryant, and Northridge to see the world and study abroad will make them ready for the world that we live in. Number two, it just makes us more attractive to continue to have students come into our school system. Makes us an attractive community. From an economic development standpoint, we are competing against other communities, and our school system needs to have the programs that can compete with the other school systems that are not only in our county, but also in our region. As I close up Elevate, one of the things that I don't think we do a good job, or I don't do a good job of highlighting, is the amount of partnerships we've been able to leverage. Since 2020, October 1, 2020 was when Elevate went into effect. We've been able to receive $121.7 million of match money. So we're getting nearly 70 plus cents per dollar being matched for Elevate. That is astonishing. And so when you think about that, we have, if you look to the bottom of that spreadsheet, we have collected $171 million. We've been able to match that with an additional $121 million. That is $293 million worth of investment. And that's about a 70% plus return on that dollar. We have been able to deliver with Elevate. And Ms. Howard, I can't thank you enough. You were one of the 4 key votes to make Elevate happen.
Hard decision, but I'm still proud of it today.
I'm glad you did. As I like to say, Elevate passed 4-3, but every ribbon cutting's been 7-0. And we have, it has been transformational for Tuscaloosa, and in large part because our team, and I'm taking credit for all their great work right now, but our team has been able to go out and leverage those dollars, whether it's from private donations, whether it's from grants. You can see up on the list, we've been able to use that to great effect. Just a reminder, as part of Elevate, we set aside 15% for operation and maintenance. This is what will fund the salaries for the Savings Center. This is what funds the crews that are cutting the grass at Parkahan Park. It is this 15% that is taking care of the Elevate-driven facilities. And right now, we have an undesignated reserve amount of $3.4 million. So overall, we anticipate net revenues this year from Elevate, once we less out abatements, less out the environmental service transfer of $5 million, to be an overall $22.6 million. Speaking of the Savings Center itself, fiscal 27 is when you begin to see the full impact as we ramp up. The costs that you see up there do not include what the state is funding through the STEM Center. These are just strictly the city's costs, not what the state is supplying. So $1.5 million in salaries, $355,000 in facility cost, $295,000 in marketing, $115,000 in supplies and services, and $350,000 in software fees. I know Ms. Buck will be going in detail with you about what this is all, how all this is integrated, and how all this will work in fiscal 27 and as we ramp up into fiscal 28. We're also recommending from Elevate to move forward with the River District parking plan. The engineering was put into the capital budget back in April. We would like to recommend that we move forward with construction. This would be an internal loan. The general fund would loan the $2.8 million, and then the River District Fund would pay it back with the dedicated funds from the capital lodging tax. So right now, 0.25% of our 11% lodging tax is dedicated towards tourism capital projects. That $400,000-ish a year would pay back the city over 6 to 7 years for the cost of this parking lot. It would be 121 spaces, 3 bus parking spaces. It's not only going to be of great benefit to the Savings Center, it's going to be of great benefit to the amphitheater, also great benefit to the 4th and 23rd area of downtown Tuscaloosa as well. So those parking spaces will be well used. We're near the end, and I know this is not the most exciting presentation, but frankly, it's one of the most important because the answer is money. What's the question? And so deliver a budget that can deliver results is something I know that we all want. And one of the unique responsibilities we have in this room is water and sewer. Most of our colleagues around the state do not have the privilege of having to operate a water and sewer utility. Only us, Northport and Dothan, operate a full water and sewer utility underneath our government operations. So we're rare in doing so, but it's ultimately a benefit for the people of Tuscaloosa. So first, let me touch on the 10-year capital plan. We started this in '22. We have, of the priority 1 projects, 67% are active or complete. So we have hit out 14 of the 21 projects. That's an estimated investment of $241 million. So we are delivering as we pledge to the people of Tuscaloosa. As you look at the water and sewer budget, the average residential water and sewer bill is $94.77. When you compare this to other utilities, it is a pretty cheap utility. Power, the average power bill in our area is $257, and the average internet and streaming bill is $130. In terms of rates, what are we recommending? We are recommending a 2.2% increase, and this is specified by code. City code requires that our rates are adjusted to the CPI. So the CPI is 2.2%, and we're certainly recommending that. The thing you must remember about, or I know that you remember about water and sewer, is that it's an enterprise fund. Unlike the general fund, this fund must pay for itself. It is an enterprise fund, and it must pay for itself. So when you look at water revenues, you can see that the growth, as we predicted when we implemented the 10-year plan, has provided the revenue sources for us to implement and make the 10-year plan a reality. So this is the water revenues. Sewer is following a similar track. And when you look at where we spend, you can see that this budget or this expenditure type is vastly different than the general fund side. So on the water and sewer side, 24% of our budget, operating budget, is salary and benefits, 15% debt service, 14% transfer to other funds, and 14% is the 10-year plan that we embarked on beginning in fiscal '22. As part of the budget, there's indirect cost, and I know this question doesn't come up as much as it used to, but the water and sewer, it pays back the general fund each year for the cost that the general fund incurs for the operations. This year, that indirect cost calculation is $10.4 million. This spreadsheet shows you how we get there. So for example, the Office of City Attorney, 45% of their work is related to water and sewer. In human resources, in terms of the number of employees, 13% of our employees are water and sewer. Fleet maintenance, 23% of our fleet is water and sewer. So this calculation is built based off what it takes for the general fund to support the water and sewer fund. And the way that I like to look at it, because I'm just a kid from Idlewood, so I don't have much walking around sense. But the way I look at it is, if the water and sewer were a separate utility, it would have to have its own fleet maintenance. It would have to have its own attorneys. It would have to have its own IT, its own HR. They're getting those services from the general fund, and this is how they pay back the general fund for those services. So like we did with the general fund, a snapshot of what's it been like since 2007? So my first budget to the city council in 2007, 30% of it was debt service. Today it's 15%. And I'm really proud that we were able to step that down. Salary and benefits make up 24% of this budget as opposed to 27% back in 2007. You can see the other costs there. So that is it. That is in the overview of the budget. I certainly was not able to talk about every initiative or every project and not all 238 pages of the budget that we have submitted to you today. Mr. Busby has scheduled 3 budget hearings, Wednesday, August 26th at 8:30 a.m., Wednesday, September 2nd at 8:30 a.m., and Thursday, September 3rd at 8:30 a.m. We look forward, Mr. Busby, to coming in and talking about our budget with the City Council. We have a record going at the city. Since 1985, we have never not passed the budget in September. If there's ever been a year, we want to keep that. We want to keep that 41-year win streak going. We have several hundred firefighters and police officers who are counting on that first paycheck in October of RSA conversion. And every bit of payroll information that I've been sending you for the last few weeks is paramount that we pass this budget in September. So
I appreciate you bringing that up. I think that speaks highly for the atmosphere of cooperation and compromise going into this budget.
And I want to pledge to you, understanding that this among any budget is unique. Whether it's midnights, weekends, we will meet with you anywhere, anytime, any place to make certain that we meet that deadline of passing this budget. Under city ordinance, I'm not required to present this budget until the last Tuesday of August. There's a reason why that we're presenting that even earlier. I want to do everything possible to make sure that we answer your questions. We satisfy any concerns. We compromise on anything that needs to be compromised on. So when October 1 comes, we're ready to rock and roll. I don't anticipate there'll be a problem because my working relationship with you has been as good, if not better, than any council I've ever worked with. So I'm very appreciative of that. Thank you all for giving me a generous amount of time today to present this. And I look forward to working with you in the weeks ahead.
Thank you very much, and Ms. Standers, thank your staff in particular. This is a massive undertaking, and we appreciate it. And so first of all, I'll offer, if there's any questions or comments from the council, either the finance committee members or non-members, we've got time to take some of those today. What I anticipate, Mayor, is we'll probably now take this and go home and start digesting it and seeing what, if any, concerns or suggestions we might have. Those 3 sessions that we've built in, those are painful. I don't do that going, oh boy. But they're necessary. This finance committee forum, when you factor in the other issues that have to be dealt with, does not provide the kind of time undistracted for us to get at some of the issues that our job is to get at. So, we've got those built in as we need them. Again, big job. We very much appreciate it.
Thank you.
Going. Gone. All right. With that ends today's scheduled topics to cover it.
Make a motion to adjourn.
So, yeah, any other business?